all of these. So potential sources of emergency water inside your home. So give me a few. What are your potential sources of emergency water inside your home during a water crisis?
Toilet tank.
Yeah, toilet. Yeah, the flush tank. Yep,
Flush tank.
yep,
Swimming pool.
yep,
Sort of.
yep, yep. If you can,
Water heater.
exactly. Yep. You know, I'm not going to force everybody to give one example, but yeah, those are great. They're great. So let's talk about minimum quantities per person per day. So everybody know the general advice? How much per person per day? One gallon. Good guess. Yeah. Okay. So 1 gallon per person per day is what agencies like the CDC typically advise. There are problems with that. If you are pregnant, if you are sick, if you have pets, if you're in a hotter climate, that's only going to make your water consumption go one way. It's going to go up. You're going to have a shortage much faster. You should store at least a 2-week supply if you're just talking about stored water. If you've ever gone camping where you had to bring your own water because there wasn't a water source, you will be amazed with how much the water you thought was overkill quickly becomes just the right amount and then becomes not enough. And you either have to get more water or cut your trip short. You'll never know when a water emergency will strike. You'll never know how long the emergency will last. So when will the emergency strike? How would you ever know that? And by storing a finite amount of water, you're limiting yourself. Now there's a divergence of thought on whether during an emergency you should use your stored water first and then use your alternative methods as a last resort. I tend to go the opposite, and I got in multiple debates with other preppers over this because there's a thing called a PACE plan, PACE, primary, alternate, contingency, emergency. So your primary would be what you use on your normal use, like you use your water is running, you use, or your bottled water. Alternate is, okay, your next best. Contingency is your third best, and emergency is your very last resort. You have nothing after that. So if you use your stored water first, thinking that, oh, they'll get the infrastructure back online quick, shouldn't be a problem. Well, what happens if you're a survivor of like the campfire, where you're done, like there's no water coming anytime soon. Even in like Flint, look how long it took. I think part of the problem was they had lead pipes bringing the water, so that's not going to be fixed in less than $1 billion in less than many years. So in an acute emergency, why would you assume that you know how long it's going to last and you can just have the water now? What if you assume that you'll use your emergency gear as a second or third resort and you didn't remember a critical device? You didn't remember that you had to replace the filter. In other words, if you don't give yourself a fail-safe and a backup, you could be really out of luck. That's why I would keep my stored emergency water as my last resort. As I'm figuring out how to get my alternate methods online, I would at least have a few jugs as a reserve if I'm going to start with my stored water. For the minimum quantities per person per day, let's say you have a family of 4. How much water would you need in terms of gallon to keep them alive for 2 weeks? About 56 gallons. So that's about 12 5-gallon jugs. And that's a pretty good amount of water, and it's a heavy amount of water. Anybody know how much a gallon of water weighs? It's about 8.5 pounds. So these things they're not that light, and the handle certainly helps. But if you have to evacuate, good luck throwing 12 jugs in the back of your sedan. So it's good to maybe throw 1 or 2 in, or have the Purify, but you definitely need to have the way to generate and purify water when you're out and about, because we live in an area where there's an abundance of natural water sources. You never can assume that they're safe to drink, but the water is there. You just have to kill the bacteria and filter the sediment. So, and if Henry wants to take him for a walk, you can undo the leash, go take him to the green if he wants. It's fine. He's fine here, but whatever he wants. So here's my quick list of food for thought. So these are all potential sources of water inside your home. So you don't even have to leave, because in an emergency, in a grid down situation, leaving your house, leaving your family, your kids could be the worst thing you could do. Not only for the obvious reasons of leaving them behind, but venturing out in public is going to be chaos, predictable danger. And you don't want to be waiting in FEMA lines. You don't want to be broadcasting that you still have gas for your car. You don't want to be letting other people know that you have supplies, even when you're coming back to your neighborhood. And go ahead. So these are things that would allow you to get water without having to leave your house. So I'm going to skip over the conventional wisdom because I already talked about that. But the water heater tank is a great option, assuming a few things. What is he bringing Henry back? Oh, guys. It's okay. Go on, go. They know not to leave Dad. So a standard water heater tank can provide 40 to 120 gallons of water. So at least 40 gallons. But what is the problem with a tankless water heater? It's pretty obvious, yeah. So you're not going to be able to get the water out. And with a conventional water heater, this is a good rule of thumb, even if you're not a prepper, even if you don't think there's ever going to be a water shortage. Drain your water tank once a year. That'll make your water tank last much longer. A lot of these fail, and I've talked to a couple plumbers, and it seems like the consensus is that people don't maintain their water heater, so the sediment builds up. It makes the heating element work a lot harder, and then sometimes they can end up bursting with all the calcium deposits and the heavy minerals that we have in our water here. So drain it so you know how to drain it, so you know how to do it properly and safely. And whether you intend to use the water for emergencies or not, it's just good practice. So first step is to turn off the power or gas to your water heater. That's to prevent the heating elements from just drying out and burning out. And then step 2 is to locate the drain valve at the bottom of the tank, place a container under that valve. And then step 3 is to open a hot water tap somewhere else in your house to allow air into the system. And then step 4 is to open the drain valve and then let the water flow into your container. Now that's going to be your non-potable container, obviously. This is water that you're going to pass through a filter. A koi pond, I may or may not have a koi pond. So this is me drinking water out of the koi pond, just using that Nalgene.
Screw it. Pop the top and drink. The Epic water filters, and when you're done, you just store it. It stays watertight, and you have water that doesn't matter where it comes from. You know, any river as you're hiking or an emergency situation, and I'm gonna even drink out of the back of my toilet. Not because I have to, because I want to. I don't think that makes it sound any better.
So yeah, don't drink out of your toilet normally. Yeah. So fish tank, another potential source of water, should be pretty obvious at this point. You have to filter it and purify it. And a very rudimentary way to just filter water as a pre-filter, say before you put water in something like a Berkey, is to just put a piece of cloth over it, just to keep the algae out, keep the excess solids. There's no benefit to having those in your water. So that will prolong the life of your filter membrane by just keeping the excess junk out. No need to have it go through the filter if you have a better option. The dehumidifier is pulling water out of the air. So that's something that I've tested. I've used it for deionized water, which is water that's so pure it's actually bad for you. You don't want to drink that because it's demineralized. There's no electrolytes. Your body will try to equalize itself by pulling minerals and calcium from your bones. So you don't want to drink water from a dehumidifier or distilled water without remineralizing and adding electrolytes back to it. Air conditioner condensation discharge hose, that's another thing that many people probably haven't thought of. If you have power and it's just a water crisis, you can run your AC and then collect the water from the discharge hose. You would loosen it, put it into your non-potable bucket, and then while your AC is running, the condensation is dripping down your drip lines, and it usually collects in your sink. Here's another tip based on lessons learned the hard way to prolong your HVAC as well as your house. Every HVAC system generates a large amount of water, and that water needs to be evacuated immediately. Your HVAC system has a drain pan that is a last resort. And what's supposed to happen is if the drain line, the discharge hose, gets plugged, then the water will start to just collect in that drain pan as a last resort. There's supposed to be a safety shutoff that once it senses water in that pan where there's never water supposed to be, it shuts off your HVAC. That didn't happen in my house, and I almost had the unit fall through the ceiling. So it eroded all the drywall. It had been leaking for, I guess, who knows how long, but it was a hot summer and everything just failed. So a couple things you can do: get your HVAC system tested. Even if you do it once a year, it's worth the cost. Make sure that they are cleaning out your drain lines. Make sure when they come over, they show you where the drain lines are and how to remove the drain line if you needed to get that water out, and how to reattach it. And if they are up there, they should check the safety shutoff valve for that drain pan. All these things, it's not cost, it's value. It's a small amount of cost compared to the devastation that it's going to do if these things all fail, which is just Murphy's Law. It's never stops with one failure. So toilet flush tank, our favorite. We have water in the flush tank, right? That's not the water in your toilet bowl. There's really not much difference from water in here versus water in a sink. So it might even be cleaner than the water in a sink. People don't realize how much bacteria is harbored in your kitchen sink. Unless you have some drunk college frat guys that are doing unspeakable things to your toilets, and it's safe water to purify and filter. All right. So ice will be a resource. Use it quickly. It's going to be melting. You can also use it for first aid, for other uses, of course, but that is a resource that you should take advantage of while you can. Canned foods, the water in your fruit cans, in your canned chicken, use it for cooking. It's going to be pretty salty, so be careful about drinking it. But canned foods have lasted over 100 years underwater. There's really nowhere for the bacteria to go. They're cooked first, so as long as they're in a reasonable climate, they're going to last far beyond the best by date. And plumbing, all right? So the pipes in your house, if you have a multi-story house, will have water trapped in them. There's basically a vacuum. So what you would do is turn off the water to your house in case there's contaminated water coming in. That would be step one. Then step two, open the highest faucet in your home to let air into the plumbing. Step three, collect water from the lowest faucet in the house. And that'll break the vacuum, let you extract the water. Now, if you have a pool, you have water. You have thousands of gallons. If it's a 12 by 5 by 24 pool, you have 10,000 gallons. So the problem will not be the quantity of water. It'll be whether you can filter out the chemicals to make it potable. So here's what you would do if you wanted to drink the water in your pool. First, make sure it's not a saltwater pool. If it's a saltwater pool, forget it. Brackish water is the worst of both worlds. You can't purify salt water that's combined with fresh water. It's two completely different types of filtration. So if you know that your pool or your neighbor's pool is not salt water, then you can use something like a big Berkey. And just so I don't skip over some of these important considerations, and let me make sure that camera is recording. I love the Berkey, but I don't love the filters. And this is another thing that I haven't learned the hard way per se because I got sick, but some people have. There's a lawsuit against Berkey right now, class action lawsuit. And their excuse for why they weren't allowed to sell in California for years, they're very limited on what they can sell in California, but most of their products they were not allowed to sell in California. So the excuse that they told the prepper community, which we all believed, was that, oh, California wants us to subject our filters to a specific NSF, National Sanitary Foundation, a specific NSF certification for each of the materials that they filter out. And I have in this 7-page document all the filtered elements that are filtered out of a proper Berkey, which is a different brand completely. You can use the Berkey, you just would use different filtration elements. So these are the black Berkey filters. And I mean, the reason these are so popular in the prepper community is that you can filter just terrible water. You can go down to this creek, you can put mud water in here and it'll come out clear. But it's probably going to be fine. Even with the problems that are now public, it's still probably going to be fine. I've been using this for 5+ years. We use it every morning in our coffee. The water is always great, but I cannot recommend the filters anymore. So there's a better option, and that's the Pro 1. And they're also made in America, which I like. So the Berkey is great. Pro 1 is the brand of filter. And just use Pro 1. They have their own Berkey style gravity filter as well. And these are so well done. The filters are so good on these, especially the Pro 1, that it's more than a filter. It's also a purifier for many of the elements. So the problem, unfortunately, with Berkey is that they just would not play ball. They would not respond to a lot of the questions they were getting. And it's why I still will use the Berkey, but I'm going to replace these filters with the Pro 1. But another great thing about the Berkey is that, sorry about that. I'm just going to turn this off for a sec. So another great thing about the Berkey, so these are portable. Oh, is there a black like kind of bag back there? What I like about the Berkey, and I've always brought this with me on camping trips because we're usually near some body of water, a lake, a creek. We have unlimited water, and you don't need power. Doesn't make any sound. There's the only expiring parts are the filters that are replaceable. So you take this thing off. It stores like nesting dolls in the case, and then there's room for associated supplies. So let's say you really want to go overkill because you're worried about viruses. You cannot trust any filter to filter out viruses. They are down to like the 0.00 or 0.001 micron level. So they just pass right through. So that's where you'd have to incorporate an alternative method for purification. Remember, clean the water and then kill the water, kill what's in there. So this is an option, a UV sterilization pen. And this is rechargeable, which means you can recharge it from a solar panel. So it's controlling for that holdback, that bottleneck. You would basically just, if you're using a Berkey in one example, you could also just put this in a glass of water that came from a Berkey, zap the clean water, as long as this is perfectly clean. There's also a different school of thought in the prepping community. Do you filter first or purify first? There's advantages to both, but in my opinion, you're better off filtering first, because if you're going to use something like a UV sterilization pen, it requires that it has visibility of the water. If you have high turbidity, if you have sediments that are in the water, it's going to block the viruses. The viruses are so tiny that if this is a piece of dirt in the water, and this is a virus, and the UV light is trying to penetrate, it's giving you a false sense of security. So again, Berkey is great as a container, but not as a filter anymore. And we're all standing by to see what happens with this class action lawsuit. There's lawyers saying that their clients have gotten sick, that they had false sense of security. They're seeking pain and suffering. I think they're also seeking punitives. So if they can survive in California, they can probably survive anywhere.
I have a question.
So, yeah.
What about purifying by boiling 30 minutes? Is that still reliable?
Absolutely. I'm going to get into that, and that's a great question. So with boiling, make sure this is back on. Am I back? Okay. So with boiling, that is absolutely a great way to kill, but that's a way to purify. So you would, that would kill almost any organism, the protozoa, the viruses, the bacteria. That's going to render them just dead, not able to replicate, harmless. And you don't even have to boil it for more than 3 minutes, and that's even really overkill. They say 3 minutes if you're above 6,000 feet, 1 minute if you're at sea level, at a rolling boil, 212 degrees Fahrenheit. The problems with that, because there's problems with everything, would be, what do you have to boil it with? If you are in a grid down situation, the gas is shut off because the earthquake shut off valve took away your gas. That's one advantage to electric stoves, but there's multiple types of workarounds. So if you wanted to boil water, one thing you could use is a portable kettle, a 12-volt kettle. You can plug that into your car, and boil water up to 212 degrees. And there's also pasteurization. So even if you can't get the water to 212, if it's just above, I'll show you, it's around 168 for a longer time, then you're still getting the benefits. It just takes longer if your water is less hot. This is a solo stove, which is called a rocket stove, and you can burn twigs, little sticks, that'll get water boiling. There's always an unlimited supply of wood, of combustible materials, organic materials around. Just in this garden, you could start a fire, you could boil the water and make it safe to drink as long as you filtered out the chlorine. So another advantage of using Berkey, which I've always used until just now, when I was doing research for this project, I didn't even realize that the concerns about Berkey were actually justified. I just thought, because there are all these rumors that, it's just because it's cost, it's too, no, it's real. You got to be careful about the Berkey filters. But they do filter out the chlorine, and you can use water test strips. And it might be something you want to do now to test the water in your house to see what kind of contaminants are in your tap water. But especially in an emergency, this would be extremely useful to have if you're going to be tapping into an emergency source repeatedly for several days or weeks. Oh, sorry. Here, you'll eat, right? Eat the food. Eat the food. Yeah. All right. So why you would need a Berkey with the Pro 1 filters is to remove the chlorine, because the chlorine in your swimming pool. Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah. We got to wrap up. We're going far too long. Sorry. So the chlorine in your swimming pool is what is going to really hurt you. But if you over-chlorinate your water and you pass it through a dechlorination filter like a Berkey, then it's rendering it safe to drink. So I'll skip over the jacuzzi, the rainwater barrel, and I'm going to take a pause now. There's part 4, part 5, part 6. I wasn't expecting to go this long, but that is a desalination device. Since I'm not going to have a chance to talk about these things, this allows you to use seawater and make it potable. It's relatively new. It's called Quench C. There's a handle that attaches to it, and it creates reverse osmosis, which in the past took a tremendous amount of energy and was very expensive. Basically, the desal plant in Carlsbad is basically an RO plant, and it makes exceptionally good water. It just filters everything out. So you want the ability to store water that you're generating. The one option, if you have your vehicle, I like having this as an option, because your vehicle is still going to be in your garage if you are at home. But if you have to leave somewhere and you have the ability to generate water, this would be a 45-gallon folding water tank. So that's close to like 400 pounds of water, and that would just go in the back seat. I guess you could use it as a water bed too. Probably not recommended. Get 2 benefits in one. This is just a collapsible water container. You should have a few of these because they take up hardly any space, and then it's there when you need it. If you need the ability to transport water, Camelbacks are great. This has a water bladder. It also has the ability to hold a water bottle. So as you're going out to seek resources, now you're carrying the water on you, so your hands are free. Later on in this presentation, I have pictures of a harness for my dog, so I'm putting them to work. They're going to filter water. They're going to carry the filtered water for me. Absolutely. And the advantage to just always filtering your water every day is that, as I showed you from these examples, you often don't know there's a problem with the water until after the fact, until you're going to the hospital. So this would give you that cushion, and then you would resort to some more drastic measures once you realize, okay, now the water is not safe to drink. Which? The pitcher? No. I mean, it can't hurt, but it's not necessary. It would just be like belt and suspenders plus something else, like totally overkill. But just storing your water, it'll last 15 to 20 years in these barrels, as long as you don't upset the valve, don't take the cap off, which should be pretty obvious. Maybe write with a Sharpie the date that you stored it. So you use a FIFO, first in, first out. Use the oldest water first. And then if it has been sitting, just to be safe, put it through some kind of filter. You don't need to purify the water. It's unlikely there's going to be any bacteria that get in it, or viruses. When we're talking about like filtering out viruses, that's when it's really a big deal. You're overseas, you're in places where maybe they have agricultural runoff, there's E. coli, but Cryptosporidium, Giardia, those are the two biggest threats in American water. And as long as you're filtering out the water, you're probably going to be fine. If you want to purify it as well, that's belt and suspenders, extra safe. And I hope you found this helpful. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.